Our story picks up from one of the bad endings in the game, a scenario where the villainess isn't just a simple antagonist. In a world plunged into despair, she aimed to annihilate everything. She was known as the Witch of Calamity, Jan Hanel. In the timeline where she isn't defeated, all life is wiped out, bringing about the worst possible outcome on an otherwise peaceful spring day. A new school semester begins in a fifth-grade classroom. The teacher announces the arrival of a new student, and that ordinary life shatters quickly. The protagonist is stunned by the girl's faint blue aura, her round rabbit-like tail, and long ears perked high. Her name? Jan Hanel. After listening to her introduce herself, sharing her love for books, music, and dramas, memories of his past life come flooding back. Yet he doesn't dwell too long on nostalgia. Her mature voice and presence are a stark reminder. This is the same which who once declared the world wasn't worth saving. She's the very villain who ended everything. The mid-tier boss from his favorite game. He knows, without a doubt, she's the Witch of Calamity. Bravehearts was that game. A school action RPG set 200 years after a world-altering disaster, where science and magic exist side by side. Players followed a boy striving to become the greatest hunter, spirit apprentice Kong Hanel. To do so, he enrolled at Jungang Academy, a hunter training school in an academic city. The story began like a typical youth tale, but its tone was far darker. The game had 44 possible endings, most ending in the collapse of the world. There was one more major flaw. Among the party members was a timid, underwhelming swordsman, a coward who never reached his potential, ran from fights, and never stood up for himself. Innocent to a fault and infuriatingly weak, he constantly dragged the party down. That character? He's our protagonist, Duke Hun, the rabbit of divine sword arts. Now, he's stuck living as that same useless character. And to make things worse, he's seated right beside one of the most dangerous figures in the entire game world. He cried under his desk, thinking that no matter how hard he tried, it was beyond his abilities. Suddenly, their teacher called his name, which shocked him. Tearing up, he looked at Jan Hanel, who was standing shyly. He knew that Hanel, who became the Witch of Calamity in the game, was a character who seemed to bear the suffering of the whole world. Abandoned by her parents at birth, ridiculed and regarded as an eyesore, she received not an ounce of affection from others, leading to a lonely and weary life. All of it happened due to a mana disaster and her being born with mutated DNA. She was an A. He remembered hearing that an A's appearance and DNA do not match their parents, but he was convinced that abandoning Hanel was too cruel. This helped him understand why Hanel became the Witch of Calamity. However, he knew he couldn't sit by and let the world's downfall happen. He thought the easiest solution would be to eliminate Hanel before she became a calamity, but he didn't want to resort to that. He began to wonder if there was another way. That he then got an idea. Their teacher instructed them to choose a classmate they wanted to sit next to, provided that classmate agreed. This directive made him think. He must change Hanel's way of thinking. As he walked toward her, he remembered that her unfortunate circumstances and environment had led her to resent the world. However, since the game's story hadn't started yet, his actions could potentially change the future. He knew that among the villains of the game, Jan Hanel possessed the ability to destroy the world. He greeted her, and she looked at him in confusion. While he was busy thinking about how to help Hanel not become pessimistic toward the world, he asked her if he could sit next to her. He thought that if things progressed, and he could bring her to his side, he could reinforce his strength. She was confused and stuttered, asking if he was talking to her. He knew there were 5 years left before the start of the game's story. So before enrolling in the academy, he decided to become friends with Jan Hanel by guiding her to the right path. He hoped to turn her from a calamity into a blessing. He grabbed the chair next to her and sat down, smiling, telling her that she would be his partner from that day onward and asked her to take care of him. He then introduced himself as Duke Kinu, and that's how Kinu became the childhood friend of the mid-level boss. When their classes ended, he stared at her as she picked up her bag, wondering how he could get closer to her. She asked if he could stop looking at her, to which he apologized, embarrassed, wondering if he had stared at her for too long. As she walked away, he stared at her again, thinking that he should stop overthinking and just ask her directly to come to his house. However, he then noticed her small tail. When she stuttered and called out to him, he jumped a little in surprise and asked what it was. As she walked closer, he asked what was wrong, but instead, she questioned why he chose to sit next to her. He replied that it was because he wanted to be friends with her. She was stunned upon hearing his answer and shyly asked why he would want to be friends with her. He responded simply that he just wanted to be friends. What else could it be? Noticing that her ears perked up, she stuttered and expressed confusion about why someone like him, who came from a prestigious swordsmanship family, would want to be friends with someone like her. He silently stared at Hanel, who seemed sad. Then, remembering something, he happily shouted Mongol, telling her she was as cute as a rabbit he once had and that he really liked rabbits. She reminded him of one that she trembled upon hearing this, and with a flushed face, shouted that she was not a rabbit. She then ran to the door, making him wonder if his comment had upset her. But before she exited, he quickly apologized. She stopped and, stuttering, told him she would see him tomorrow. She then ran off, leaving him relieved that she wasn't angry. That a moment later, as he walked down the street, he couldn't believe he had entered the world of the game. He wondered why he couldn't see his status window. If this world was still a game, then where was it? He checked behind him and shouted, "Status window." Suddenly, the system popped up in front of him, and he decided to take a closer look. He was surprised to see that Dukan's abilities were quite impressive for his age. Physical strength at 37, muscle strength at 34, endurance at 32, agility at 43, MA at 30, and luck at 25. Convinced that his abilities were actually quite good, he wondered why Kinu had constantly been bullied in the game with such potential. Still, he acknowledged that this was a fresh start, far superior to his previous life. That a moment later, he arrived at his mansion and, upon entering, shouted, "I'm home." The lady of the house greeted him, along with the maid, and asked how school was and if everything was okay. He was stunned to see the lady but rushed to hug her. She asked worriedly what was wrong, that he knew now that he wasn't living his past life, nor should he think of this as just a game. He decided he should fully embrace his life as Dukan. He told the lady it was nothing, that he just felt grateful to have her. She advised him that if anything happened, he should tell her. She then instructed him to wash up, and she would prepare a snack before he headed to the sword training academy. He replied, "Okay," and ran to his room, walking upstairs with the knowledge that he needed to embrace his role as Dukan. What he needed most right now was to master the Beast King style, a sword technique that represented his prestigious swordsman family. Like a lion reigning over all beasts, this technique focused power at the tip of the sword. It was also the technique that made Kunu the greatest swordsman, that he then called for Mongel, his male rabbit. Getting closer, he took the rabbit out of its cage. Noticing that Mongel resembled Hanel, he thought to himself that he should completely master the Beast King style. That a moment later, in the training room, he noticed there were few people around and realized he was early. He knew that these sword trainings operated in several cities, and people outside the family learned conventional swordsmanship, not the Beast King style, which was why so many attended the training academy. He wondered why everyone had suddenly stopped what they were doing and looked in the same direction. There, he saw Duan, the Du family's sword deity, known as Lightning Flower. She was 2 years his senior, the most promising prodigy among all current Du family children. In the game, Xian was a student at Jungang Academy who became the strongest swordsman after graduation, and a powerful ally of Du King. He pondered why Xian was there, but then realized that, being a sword training academy of the Du family, it wasn't unusual for her to be present. He hung up his shirt, anticipating frequent future encounters with a certain someone, and then shifted his focus to honing his skills in the Beast King style. Grabbing his training sword, he settled into the initial stance. He began the first form of the Beast King style, meticulously counting each repetition until he reached 10. Pausing, a fleeting thought crossed his mind about whether Cheyenne would be impressed by his dedication. He found a certain enjoyment in the exertion and the sheer fun of the practice. Suddenly, his concentration was shattered by a voice dripping with derision. asking who that one kid was and what exactly was wrong with him. Another voice chimed in with a teasing question about whether a rabbit had now taken up sword practice. His gaze then fell upon Wu Yunong, who was mid-meal, questioning if the rabbit was indeed him. Wu Yunong himself then appeared, asking why he was there so early, followed by Wang An, who doubted his ability to apply his skills in a real fight, even betting that he couldn't catch a single rabbit. He recognized these three identical triplets as the extra characters from the game, infamously known as Cerberus, and the very kids who had a penchant for bullying him. Fueled by his cousin Desu's negative influence and irritated by their unwanted presence, he realized this was the first time their taunts had actually managed to derail his focus. One of the triplets, persistent in their goading, pressed him for a response. He understood that their relentless teasing wasn't the sole reason for his inability to concentrate. A significant part of his frustration stemmed from his own inaction, his anger directed inward for allowing their bullying to persist. The memories flooded back, everything that happened to Kimu in his past life, and he questioned his past self's passivity, why he had never stood up against their constant harassment. He recalled a specific instance when the triplets had cornered him, their words like venomous darts, telling him that the head of the Du family must be ashamed of him, that he was a disgrace to their lineage, and that they even felt pity for his parents. This particular memory reignited a familiar burning hatred for the pain their words inflicted. Dong Dong, with a mocking tone, questioned the purpose of his sword swinging. He then had the audacity to suggest that they become his sparring partners, a proposition quickly seconded by Yunong, who teasingly offered their help, fully aware of the inherent strength of the human body. Kinu, a hint of steel in his voice, told them they should spar lightly, treating it as a mere game. A moment later, a collective gasp of shock rippled through the other kids as he executed his Beast King-style technique, adopting the charging stance and delivering a swift strike to Dong's stomach. Jamung was sent reeling backward, and Dong Dong, filled with worry, called out to him, pointing out the blood now trickling from his nose. Yunong, stammering in disbelief, asked what was wrong with him. A dizzy Jamung informed his brothers that his vision was blurry. Angrily, he questioned Jamung if he expected to end things there. He then urged his brothers to quickly retrieve their swords and get back on their feet. Dong Dong, still checking on his injured brother, muttered that Kinu was acting quite strangely, a sentiment echoed by a horrified Yunong, who told his brothers that Kinu had undeniably changed. Jamung, tried to regain some semblance of control, told them not to exaggerate, reassuring them that one doesn't simply die from a little nosebleed. Kinu then delivered a pointed reminder. He, the one who had been their frequent target in the past, could certainly attest to that. Yunong, his voice rising in indignation, shouted, demanding to know why Kinu was doing this to them, questioning his sanity. Yunong then invoked their supposed powerful backing, asking if Kinu truly believed they would let this slide. Kinu, his tone dangerously calm, inquired if they were referring to his cousin Dsu and if they genuinely believed Dsu would protect them from the consequences of their own actions. The triplets were visibly shaken by this, a fragmented memory flashing through their minds, a time on the street when they had loudly proclaimed their aspirations of becoming hunters, only to be met with Dsu's dismissive remark about the exorbitant fees for hunter education, stating that it was, realistically speaking, an unreasonable ambition for them. Junong then recalled hearing that talented individuals receive sponsorships, and Dong Dong, his eyes lighting up with sudden hope, excitedly asked if that meant the fees would be completely free. DSU had then posed the direct question, did they actually want to get sponsored? To which they had eagerly agreed. DSU had then nonchalantly stated that he would handle it and that it was nothing difficult, before adding a crucial detail. They were in the same school as Kinu, implying their paths would cross frequently. Kinu then delivered the final blow, his words laced with a quiet intensity. He had simply been allowing their bullying to happen before, and it seemed they had conveniently forgotten that he was, in fact, a member of the Du family as well, which meant it was easy for him to remove them from his family sponsorship list if he chose to. He then asked them if they really thought Sumo was the only one who could do it. The triplets were horrified, wondering how things had turned out this way. Suddenly, their teacher called them punks and demanded to know what they were doing, asking how many times he needed to tell them not to spar without permission. The teacher then told Kumu that even if he was not a model member of the Do family, he still should not be fighting. But Kinu simply pointed to the triplets and replied that they had started it first. This left the teacher confused, but Kumu asked if he was expected to just stay still and endure their bullying when he was a Do just as much as they were. The teacher then asked the triplets if they really had been picking on Kunu. Initially stunned, they glanced away to think, and then all admitted that they had started it, confirming that Kinu was right. They had cursed at him, and Kinu was not at fault. This left the teacher looking at them confusedly. Meanwhile, Kunu, feeling refreshed by the admission, thought to himself that he should have stood up for himself earlier. The next day, he arrived at school and walked into the classroom, wondering if he had arrived too early. He then looked to his side and saw Hanel alone, deeply engrossed in her book. He stared at her for a moment and greeted her. She shyly covered her face with the book and greeted him back. He then sat next to her, determined to try his best to befriend Hanel that day. He commented that she was always early and always reading books, then asked if she really liked reading that much. She replied yes, and asked him if he liked reading too. He responded that he wasn't really into books, but more into web novels, which confused her. When she asked why he joined the book club, he replied that it was because she had signed up. She said she understood, but then shyly asked him to repeat what he had said. He playfully asked if she read web novels too. She stuttered and admitted yes, but explained that she did not have much pocket money, so she could only read the free ones. Remembering that she lived in an orphanage, he decided to change the topic to avoid offending her and asked what drama she liked. She replied that she enjoyed the drama Luxury House and asked him how he knew she liked dramas. He reminded her that she had mentioned it during her introduction. Surprised that he remembered, she wondered why he was talking to her, and if it was because he did not have any friends either. She suspected that Kaninu was only fascinated because she was an A and feared that he too would eventually lose interest. Seeing her become downcast at the thought, he noticed her ears and wondered if she would mind if he asked to touch them. He then realized she really resembled Mongel and got an idea. He asked her if she wanted to see a video of Mongel, and when she asked if that was his rabbit, he told her he had taken a cute video of Mongel the day before. She expressed interest in seeing it, and he showed her the video, explaining that when rabbits are in a good mood, they jump around excitedly in what is called a binky. She was amazed to see it and commented on how cute Mongel was that he noticed her rabbit ears stand up again. So he asked her if she wanted to come to his house to see Mongel. She immediately replied yes, but then hesitated when she realized what she had agreed to. He then raised his little finger as a promise and suggested they play at his house after school. His face turned red as tomatoes, and she thought she should refuse because she did not want to relive past negative experiences. But after school, she was amazed and surprised when she saw his house, remarking that it was like the one in Luxury House, the drama she watched. Whose mother then came out and asked Hanel if she was Who's friend, welcoming her warmly. Hyunu greeted his mother happily, while Hanel stood in shock, remembering how her old friend's parents had told them not to play with an A and had warned her not to just befriend anyone. Q's mother told Hanel that it was the first time Kumu had brought a friend over and expressed how happy she was, encouraging her to have fun. Kimu then inquired with his mother if she could prepare them tekbaki, a request she happily agreed to fulfill. He then took Han's hand, urging her to come inside quickly, even though he knew Q's initial burst of curiosity might not last long. Despite this internal awareness, Hanuel still seemed reluctant to release his hand. Once inside, she was taken aback by the unexpected spaciousness of his house. They proceeded to eat the tekbaki together, and then spent time playing with Mongel, an activity that brought her considerable joy. Several hours later, Q's father returned home, announcing his arrival with a cheerful, "I'm back," whose mother commented on his slightly later arrival than usual, and Kunu greeted his father, who acknowledged his tardiness and then inquired about Un's earlier crying fit. Apparently, she had been upset because she missed her rabbit sister too. Kunu explained that his friend had come over that day, but Yin wasn't home, which was the reason for Un's distress. Kimu then approached his father and asked if they could spar after dinner. His father's initial surprise quickly morphed into excitement as he exclaimed that he had been wondering when he would get the chance to play with him, especially now that Kimu was in 5th grade, who expressed his eagerness to gauge his own improvement and to experience genuine combat. His father, slightly taken aback by the intensity of the request, double-checked if Kimu truly meant actual combat. Kimu confirmed with a resolute yes, adding that he would like to face some real monsters. A moment later, his father questioned this sudden desire to spar, advising him that there was no need for impatience, as it wasn't yet his time to face true danger. His father also probed his underlying motivations. Kunu glanced at his hand, a silent acknowledgement of the future he foresaw. In 5 years, he would enter the Du Family Sword Academy headquarters and inevitably confront various crises alongside the protagonist, Kong Hill. To prepare for this, a solid foundation in real combat was essential. He was certain that the other children in the Du family had already accumulated their combat experience, leaving him significantly behind, a gap he knew he needed to close now. When Kunu remained silent, his father's gaze sharpened, asking if this sudden interest in sparring was related to the recent incident at the Sword Training Academy. His father then spoke seriously, stating that he had heard about the fight at the academy and that the child Kimu had fought was seriously injured. However, to Kinu's surprise, his father reassured him that he had done nothing wrong. Kinu, taken aback by this, perceived that his father was more interested in understanding the truth than in reprimanding him. Knowing that he would never resort to violence without a valid reason, Kimu replied, explaining that he had been taught from a young age that the sword techniques of the divine swordsmanship of the Du family were meant to protect and save people, a lesson he had internalized deeply. He believed that this conviction was a direct result of his reflections on his past life and the lessons learned therein, and that contemplating the future had fundamentally shifted his mindset. He then posed a question to his father. Shouldn't he be capable of protecting himself? And how could someone unable to protect themselves ever hope to protect others? His father then inquired if that was the true reason behind his fight. Kimu confidently affirmed this, explaining that his goal was not only to protect himself, but also to safeguard others, and for that, he needed to confront real monsters. A smile spread across his father's face as he heard this answer. He told Kimu that he was not wrong, and that his reasoning was entirely valid. His father then patted his head and told him that he had changed a lot. He asked his father if he would help him, to which his father replied that he would, but there was a condition. He asked his father what it was. His father pointed the training sword at him and told him to prove that he had developed enough skill to face a real monster. His father then said he wouldn't use mana and wouldn't move more than 5 steps, so he should feel free to pounce. He asked his father about using the Beast King style, and his father replied that he would only use the basics, to which he responded that he understood. He hesitated about the conditions set by his father, but was glad that his father told him not to hesitate to use the sword if necessary. His father then teasingly told him to attack, and he decided to do exactly as his father instructed. He exhaled to calm himself and positioned his training sword. He then swung his sword at his father, who easily blocked it without moving, causing him to be thrown off balance a little, but he managed to land perfectly. He then bent his knees, jumped high, and launched another attack on his father, but his father blocked it again. His father then pushed him slightly away and told him that it wasn't going to work. But he immediately launched his sword without going down and swung at his father, who jumped away to dodge it. When he saw his father just land, he knew it was the right time, so he immediately launched an attack again, but his father blocked it. As his father began to speak, telling him that he was going to use it, he struck his father on the side without letting his father finish his words. His father looked at his side, seeing that he had managed to hit him. His father then jumped away, holding his side in pain, and called him a brat, telling him that he had allowed the hit but that it was really hard. Exhausted, he asked his father if he could acknowledge his ability, but his father just told him that he had really grown up and didn't even hesitate to hit his own father. He laughed and asked if he passed, to which his father shouted affirmatively, of course, calling him a rude brat. The next morning, his father told his mother that they would be leaving and would probably return home before dinner. His mother worriedly asked if he was sure about sending Kumu there, questioning if Kumu was too young and if it wasn't too early for him, while Yin shouted that she wanted to go too. He and his father were both stunned upon hearing his mother and sister. His father then told his mother that he thought it would be fine, to which she agreed. His mother then told him to be careful and not to overdo it, to which he replied affirmatively, telling his mother not to worry because he would be back later. They entered the car, and his father asked him if he was ready, suggesting they head to the clan academy, to which he replied affirmatively. His father then started driving that he remembered that according to the game settings, the world had become dramatically unstable since the time of the calamity change, heavily influencing the world. This instability began as monsters started pouring out from the distorted dimension, leading to a dungeon being transformed on the other side in that process. When the distorted dimensions of different worlds meet, a gate is created. He knew that if this phenomenon wasn't resolved in time, the world inside the gate would explode and scatter into reality. An outbreak is a phenomenon where the world in the gate explodes and scatters out. It differs from dungeons, and if they fail to conquer it within the time limit, it will significantly impact the ending. He knew that to reach the desired ending, they also needed to pay attention to the gate erosion rate, which was necessary for character growth as well. His thoughts were interrupted when his father told him that they should grab the key first. After arriving, he asked his father where the gate was, and his father replied that it was kept in the warehouse. He knew that once they cleared a gate, they obtained a gate key with which they could clear it again, a feature created by the game developers for players who wanted to re-clear the gate. He pondered whether this setting was still in function after his reincarnation. A moment later, his father stopped the car and told him that they had arrived. They got out, and his father introduced him to his workplace, the Regulus clan. The Regulus clan was established during the catastrophe by the first head of the Du family. It now has several branches across the country. Access to the dungeon gates and monster habitats managed by the government normally requires a hunter's certificate. He knows that since he doesn't possess a certificate yet, he shouldn't be able to enter the gate. However, his father, who is the branch manager, is greeted warmly by the employees, making his situation within the clan unique. He thinks he doesn't need to adhere strictly to those restrictions, and with his father's help, he can just go through the gate that is kept by the clan. Suddenly, he heard someone shout excitedly, and a hand grabbed him. A lady then hugged him, asking if he was their manager's son, while the other employees surrounded him, glad that he looked all innocent, a good thing he didn't take after his father. One of the employees started playfully squeezing his cheeks, exclaiming how adorable he was and expressing a strong desire to give him a hug. Shortly after, he found himself being showered with kisses by the enthusiastic employee hunters. When the woman then inquired with his father about their intention to enter the gate with his son, it left him pondering if all hunters possessed such an affectionate nature. The lady then informed his father that they would be accessing room 2 as planned, and his father indicated that they should proceed. However, he was puzzled when he saw the key his father received and asked why it was white. He recalled learning that the gate's difficulty levels were indicated by 7 distinct key colors, starting with white for the easiest, followed by gray, yellow, green, red, blue, and finally black for the most challenging. His father explained that the white level would provide sufficient challenge for him, to which he responded that he understood, though he secretly desired to attempt the gray level. His father then opened the gate, signaling that they should enter. Upon passing through, he noticed another gate within. His father clarified that this was an artificial gate and that inserting a key obtained from clearing a dungeon would activate it. He was amazed by this sight, remembering that the low maintenance costs of such gates were crucial to sustaining a large clan, a realization that underscored his family's considerable power. His father then called him over, his tone becoming serious, to inform him that they were about to enter the gate and to ask if he was truly ready. His father advised him to reconsider carefully, as once inside, they would be unable to leave until the dungeon was cleared. He silently met his father's gaze for a moment before confidently stating that he had already given it ample thought. His father offered a slightly worried smile, but before inserting the key, asked if his father would intervene should he fail to clear the dungeon. His father reassured him that even in failure, he would have his support, but cautioned him not to push himself too hard and risk his mother's displeasure. His father then inserted the key, activating the gate. The gate slowly swung open, and as he stepped through, his eyes widened at the sight of crystals everywhere, their facets catching the light brilliantly. He looked around in astonishment, this being his first experience entering a gate. At that moment, a system notification appeared, informing him that he had entered the White Level's Pink Crystal Cave and that his mission was to eliminate goblins ranked 0.1. He absorbed this information from the system display that he wondered if the conditions for clearing were simple because it was a white level gate, and asked where the goblins might be. Suddenly, he heard a sound behind him, quickly drew his sword, and positioned himself while holding the real sword, knowing it was dangerous and he should be cautious. He then waited, staying on guard so he wouldn't be taken by surprise. He was then surprised to see his father in front with the goblins tied up. He ran to his father and asked if he had captured all the goblins. His father replied that they were all there. He counted the goblins and confirmed there were 15 in total. He calmed himself down and told his father he was ready. His father said they should begin then, and since he couldn't handle them all at once, they should start with one. His father walked towards the smallest goblin, telling him it might be the weakest of the group, but he shouldn't be careless and must stay alert. But before his father could finish his sentence, the goblin freed itself in anger, surprising his father a little. The goblin then rushed at him while he asked his father if he was referring to the fact that they are fierce, to which his father agreed and reminded him not to forget it. He knew that he possessed knowledge from games, but as a member of the Divine Swordsmanship Due family, he also held knowledge about monsters. He thought these creatures must have understood that their only chance to survive was to fight him. The goblin then grabbed a sharp crystal, making him realize it was desperate enough to use a crystal as a weapon. He knew he had to be cautious because a small mistake could be disastrous. He then bent down, thinking that since it was an actual fight, he should put in his everything. He then activated his Beast King-style basic technique, fifth form piercing stance, and thrust his sword at the goblin's head. He pierced his sword into its head, and the goblin kneeled on the ground. The goblin then lay on the ground, dead, causing his father to sigh in relief. He tightly grasped his sword and proudly declared that one was down for now. As a party member of the main character Kong Hole, Dukunu has one restriction. There is a feature called Gift in the game, and among the passive skills that define the character, Duku's gift is Evasion Instinct. At first glance, it seems like a useful ability. His father then released 2 goblins, and as they faced him, he contemplated that Evasion Instinct is literally the ability to move one's body instinctively to avoid attacks when sensing a life-threatening crisis. While it appeared to be a useful ability for Dukunu, who wields a sword, his fearful and fragile character often leads him to disobey commands, causing the gift to be rejected. Due to this gift, players generally did not include Dukunu in their party unless it was unavoidable. The evasion instinct also caused Dukunu to defy player commands, leading to frustration. However, there's an event in the story that triggers Q's awakening later in the narrative. Kumu gains control over his gift after the awakening. A character who awakens late becomes a remarkably strong morale booster, and later, Kumu demonstrates his overwhelming ability to defeat enemies by avoiding most of their attacks. He remembers that it was said raising Kumu, could make the later part of the game easier. But he knows it is still a long way off, and if he does nothing but wait, it'll be too late. So he couldn't just sit still and wait. The goblins growled at him in anger, and he stared back at them, knowing he needed to advance his awakening. He knew it might be impossible if it was just a game, but for him, it was reality. He then remembered that when he played the game, he didn't find any situation that triggered the awakening in the later part of the story, so he thought it must not be hard to awaken early. He then jumped closer to the goblins and swung his sword, determined to push himself to the limit. Later, many goblins lay dead on the ground, but he told his father to release the next one. His father suggested they take a rest, but he replied that if it was only to that extent, he was fine. His father sighed and said that if he insisted, they should face all of them. While the last four goblins stared at him in anger, his father then released them all, and the goblins rushed at him. But they all jumped behind him, catching him off guard. He looked around, wondering if it was a diversion tactic, and noticed that two of the goblins were above him, but he couldn't locate the other two. Suddenly, he felt something approaching from behind. He let his body react for a moment, and his gift, evasion instinct, swiftly moved him to the side. Then something from behind tried to hit him, but he avoided it, and it struck the crystal in front instead. He was stunned in horror when he realized that his body had moved without his conscious will, indicating that his gift had activated. Knowing that the evasion instinct had sensed the crisis, he resolved to trust that instinct. He then positioned his feet, ready to deal with the goblins first. Thanks to his gift, he managed a spot where the four goblins were hiding and swore he wouldn't fall for their trick again. One of the goblins threw another crystal from behind, but he reassured himself it was fine since his evasion instinct was activated. He dodged the crystal, shocking the goblin who threw it. He then jumped, using the crystal to reach one of the goblins, trying to hit him with arrows. He slashed the goblin in half with his Beast King-style basic second form, attack stance. But he was surprised when he looked behind and saw the goblins waiting for him at his intended landing spot with a sharp crystal. He then compressed and rotated the mana within his body, loading the mana that emerged from his heart into his sword. Now, wrapped by mana, he swung his sword with his Beast King-style first form, Lion Crush Cut, and successfully slashed the two goblins. As he waited for his landing, he safely touched down on the ground and immediately asked if only one goblin remained. Shouting confidently, he declared that he'd go straight for it. However, his father interrupted, cautioning him not to rush and questioning what would happen if he got hurt. Unfazed, he replied that it was fine because he believed he could handle it. His father warned him to be careful since it was the last goblin and advised him to exercise more caution. He agreed and proceeded toward the final goblin. A moment later, his father silently observed him, deciding to place trust in his son while glancing at the piles of dead goblins his son had slain. As he caught his breath, his father called out to him. The system then displayed a notification stating that he had successfully cleared the gate and that an exit gate would soon be generated where the gate key would appear. It also warned that the gate would close in 24 hours. Suddenly, a bright circle of light appeared above them, and within it descended the key. It landed softly in his palm, and he noticed it was the same white key they had used before. Clenching his teeth, he cursed inwardly. His father, chuckling, asked what was wrong with his expression and whether he doubted that he had cleared the gate. He simply called out to his father, who responded with a proud smile. Yet, instead of celebrating, he hesitantly asked his father if there were any other gates available. He then realized that he wouldn't be able to use that dungeon for practice until its cooldown period ended, as the gate's power had been depleted upon closing. Still, he knew the gate would reactivate once it replenished its energy. This thought made him wonder what he should do next, especially since he hadn't awakened his gift yet. His musings were interrupted when his father, Sangun, spoke up, expressing how surprised he was. Sangun admitted that he had expected his son to stop after defeating 4 goblins, but was astonished to see him effortlessly take down 5. Sangun shook him proudly, asking whose son he was, and remarked that there was nothing left to do there, so they should clean up and head home. Sangun began walking toward the exit and asked for the key. Hesitating, he called out to Sangun, leaving his father confused. He explained that he felt like he was on the verge of awakening his gift and thought it would be a pity to leave just like that. He suggested to Sangun that they try clearing another gate if there was enough time left. Sangun paused, asking if he had truly awakened. He confirmed with a yes and proposed that they attempt something more challenging. He told Sangun that he believed they'd be okay to enter a great grade gate now and that he could handle 2 rank monsters. Sangun, looking serious, reminded him that his mother, Jie, would be furious if she found out he allowed such a thing. Nonetheless, he insisted, saying everyone would die eventually anyway, prompting Sangun to question if he truly was his son. Sangun acknowledged his desire to push himself, but firmly warned that fighting a 2-rank monster was still too much for him at this stage. However, if it was a white grade gate, it would be acceptable. He asked Sangun if that was really what he thought, and after a brief pause, Sangun agreed. He told his son that, as a swordsman, he understood his ambition, but reminded him that being overly ambiguous wouldn't lead to achievement. These words filled him with happiness, and he thanked his father. Sangun, however, simply reminded him that he would step in whenever he was in danger. They then headed to the white grade gate, and he realized that not all white grade gates were the same. Sangun warned him that it was going to be tough and mentioned that he had brought support just in case, pointing to the man who greeted them. He knew that the support consisted of dungeon-specialized magic hunters who typically used healing or buffs to assist other hunters. Sangun cautioned him to stay alert, as monsters might rush them immediately after entering the dungeon. Sangun then asked if he was ready to proceed, to which he confidently replied, yes. They entered the gate, and the system notified him that he had entered the white grade gate, Pink Crystal Cave. His mission was to subjugate 15 monster goblins of 1 rank. Looking around, he realized it was the same world where he had fought earlier. He wondered where the monsters were when he suddenly felt something approaching and barely managed to dodge it in time. Horrified, he wondered what had just happened, but then the system alerted him that numerous monsters had appeared. For normal goblins, 7 swordsman goblins, 3 archer goblins, and 1 mage goblin. He noticed there were 15 goblins, but these weren't ordinary goblins. They had specific roles, which drove him crazy. He knew his evasion instinct was activated and that his gift controlled his body. He also knew that if he didn't want to die, he should run away. The man accompanying them turned to Sangun, expressing concern that it might be hard for Yanwo, and asking if Sangun really intended to leave him alone. Sangun didn't respond, knowing that Kumu had changed recently. In the past, Kumu was easily startled by small things, but lately, he seemed different. Sangun was convinced that Kumu had grown stronger, and it wasn't necessarily a bad change. Sangun reflected on how Kumu had always been a kind-hearted child but struggled to fit into the fierce competition within the Divine Swordsman Du family due to his compassionate nature. He always hesitated to hurt others, even if it put himself in danger. Sangun remembered how his son smiled happily when he received his first sword, and how he would cry tears of joy whenever he held it. Sangun then sadly looked at his hand, thinking about how many of Yanwo's peers mocked him by calling him a rabbit. Every time he heard that, he wanted to intervene, but couldn't bring himself to do so. He wondered why Kumu had changed so drastically when he became a 5th grader. Ja had told him that the change was because Kumu liked someone in his class, but Sangun suspected there must be another reason. Sangun recalled that while he was contemplating Yanwo's situation, someone from the Sword Training Academy contacted him. The man introduced himself as Kumu's swordsmanship teacher and began complaining about Kumu's behavior. After hearing the teacher's complaints, Sangun asked if Kumu had been fighting with other kids under the pretext of sparring, asserting that his son wouldn't engage in such behavior without a valid reason. The teacher hesitated, guessing that Kumu hadn't told his father because of how he might react, and then revealed that Kumu had been bullied. Knowing his son wouldn't harm others without cause, Sangun scolded the teacher angrily. The teacher tried to dismiss the behavior as typical playful roughhousing, claiming it was natural for children of that age to get absorbed in their own strength and play around. Furious, Sangun questioned whether this meant that Yanwo had been bullied by other kids all along and if the teacher was joking about such a serious matter. Overwhelmed with anger at the thought of someone from the prestigious Divine Swordsman Du family receiving such treatment at the Sword Training Academy, Sangun demanded to know if someone had instructed the teacher to keep silent about the bullying and who they were. The teacher reluctantly disclosed the identity, and Sangun realized that Kumu had suffered such humiliation because he didn't hold much power within their family. Sangun figured out that it was Du Banjan, his 3rd older brother, behind this. He called Banjin to confront him about the bullying, but Banjin dismissively said they were just playing. He sarcastically apologized to Sangjun and promised to tell his son, Su, to apologize as well, assuring him that such actions wouldn't be repeated. Still, Bumjin added that Sangjun must have had a hard time enduring it all due to his cowardly personality, provoking Sangjun to question whether Bumjin truly considered this an apology. Bumjin retorted, asking Sangjun what more he expected him to do. Reflecting on the situation, Sangjun realized that while he had felt powerless, he had simply been enduring it alone. So, when Kumu expressed his desire to experience real combat, Sangun felt a swell of pride for his son, glad that he had decided not to endure the bullying any longer. After Kumu cleared the first dungeon and retrieved the key, Sangun noticed that his performance had exceeded expectations. Although Sangun had initially worried that his son might panic and rush recklessly, he saw that Yianwu handled the situation calmly and adeptly. Sangun smiled, acknowledging that his child had been a prodigy for a long time. However, as he watched Yianwu from above, he remembered that Kumu was still only 12 years old and needed to grow at a steady pace. Suddenly, Sangjiwen's concern deepened when he saw Yianwu get injured in the arm, causing Sangun to clench his teeth at the thought that his misjudgment had put his son in danger. The man next to Sangun asked if it wasn't the right time to intervene, noting that Yianwu seemed to have run out of energy and that the monster might catch him. However, Yianwu remained calm, facing the goblins and challenging them to come at him. Sangun knew that stepping in would disappoint his son, but acknowledged that Kumu was quite skilled for his age and decided to simply encourage him instead. Sangun then called out to a man named Hongchul, instructing him to prepare the protection shield magic. Hongchul responded that it might be needed at any moment. Sangun then detailed his plan. The moment the goblin attacked Yianwu, they would charge in all at once. He would take out the mage goblin first, while Hongchul was to use the protection shield magic as Yianwu dodged the archer goblin. However, Sangun was stunned to see Yianwu's rigid movements, indicative of fear. Yet, he wondered if his perception was clouded by his own apprehension as he positioned himself. Sangjun was shocked to witness Yianwu slashing the goblins in front of him with his Beast King-style fourth form, Lion Needle Recursion attack. Before this, Kumu had been running away, aware of the danger, because the goblins coordinated so well that there was no opening for an attack. However, he knew he couldn't keep fleeing or he would remain the same fearful Kuno. Positioning himself with his sword, he thought the Beast King-style first form should work, but was annoyed by Yianwu's instinctive gift of evasion. His body avoided the goblin attack involuntarily, and the persistent voice in his head kept interfering, warning him of death if he stayed. It told him that if he died there, all his efforts would have been wasted and that fleeing was his only respite. He noticed this voice restricted his actions and made his body move against his will. When the voice urged him to flee, he tried to command his gift to stop running and to listen to him. He wondered if this was how the real Kumu felt before his awakening. Noticing his body torn between will and instinct, feeling as if it would rip into two pieces, one of the sword-wielding goblins lunged at him. The voice screamed at him to dodge, but instead he swung his sword forward, shouting back at the voice that he must not avoid it. After killing the goblin, he realized he could resist the evasion instinct and that there might be enough distance between them now. Unaware of the archer goblin behind him,